Hello, ladies, gentlemen, ladies, gentle them, and any gender identifier in between. This is a weekly radio program where we dig underneath the headlines. We probe through the mass media propaganda. We look to investigate and report on what is actually happening here in the state of Michigan, in America, and around the world, and generally call out the establishment on its BS. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University, no matter how insightful they may, in fact, turn out to be. So we've got a lot to talk about on the show this week, as we always do. We're going to be giving some updates. We've got some numbers attached to the price tag for clearing out the homeless camp downtown. Not to sound too clickbaity, but what you hear will definitely shock you. If not, just make you feel a little disgusted. I wanted to make sure to maybe play some clip or two from a recent lecture that happened here in the city. If you didn't get a chance to, it was a very interesting historical lecture. It's called How FDR Segregated Kalamazoo. I want to play some bits from that later on and maybe discuss it for a hot sec. Speaking of hot, planet's getting hotter every year. There's a new report out from scientists about the imminent threats of climate catastrophe. We're going to cover that, of course. Brazil had a very alarming election the other day. But let's start out the program. This is an international/national story. It goes back to a subject that we discuss a lot on the show, and that is Israel, and particularly its treatment of Palestinians, those in the Gaza Strip, etc., etc., and of course, resistance to it, which is most high profile or prominent, I suppose would be in the way to say it, in the BDS movement. And there was recently an arrest that I wanted to talk about. So I'm mostly going to read from this article. It's put out by Mint Press News, although it's also been getting a little bit of mainstream attention. But the way it's been painted on, say, like CBS Morning News, they leave out a lot of the actual political details behind it. So I wanted to make sure to kind of cover it for all the listeners out there, and particularly since this involves a college student. Of course, we are broadcasting out of a college radio station, so going ahead and reporting. This is actually aggregated from the Middle East Monitor, but posted on Mint Press News for those who want to find it with ease. Headline: American college student held in Israel for support of BDS movement. An American student has become the latest victim of Israel's law targeting supporters of the global Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. Lara Al-Qasim, 22, has been held since last Tuesday at Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Al-Qasim, and by the way, sorry to Laura if I am mispronouncing her name. Al-Qasim is a graduate of the University of Florida and a U.S. citizen whose grandparents are Palestinian. She tried to enter Israel to study on a master's degree program at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, having been granted a student visa by the Israeli Consulate General in Miami. Upon her arrival at the airport, and hold on just a sec, I think somebody's knocking at the door. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. Joined now by my co-host, Lawrence.
Howdy, howdy. What up?
Yep. And so I was just talking about this whole situation where there's this student. She went to the University of Florida. And actually, let me read just a little bit more from the article to give more context. Maybe we could dive in and discuss it a bit. A special ministry report has been compiled about Al-Qasim and her political activities. It was labeled somewhat dramatically, quote-unquote, sensitive, and according to Hoodrat, includes information from 5 web pages. 4 are from Facebook, apparently, but the bulk of the information used to detainers from a website called Canary Mission. This notorious pro-Israel organization blacklists activists and academics seeking justice for Palestinians, and has even been criticized by other pro-Israel groups for its aggressive tactics, which it kind of sounds similar to the practice of doxing, which is something that is often, both a tool of anti-fascists and fascists themselves here in the United States. As of Sunday afternoon... Oh, wait, no. That's... Okay, let me pull out the other important part of this. Al-Qasim is the latest individual to fall foul of the Israeli law targeting supporters of BDS. In May, U.S. civil rights activists were deported by the Israeli authorities following their detention at Ben Gurion Airport. The law has been slammed by the human rights group, which have denounced the measure as blatantly anti-democratic. So...
I mean, a regime that doesn't want a free press to tell the truth about the atrocities that they're doing, you don't say. And they want to stifle and or stop journalists from doing their job, which is telling the truth about the horrible things that they were doing. You know, like killing 12-year-old kids who are with sniper fire, with the Great March of Return. They just got done not only killing a 12-year-old boy, they last month they shot a 15-year-old first responder female medic that had the word medic on her flat jacket.
Oh, I remember.
I mean, not her flat jacket, on her shirt. And since the Great March of Return, the Israeli forces have used snipers to shoot unarmed protesters. And people like Abby Martin, who's a fantastic journalist, who's a part of Empire Files, they went to Gaza. They went to the border, and they wasn't allowed to do their job and report on what's going on because the Israeli government forbidded them of doing so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know what? One of the things I wanted to bring up, it reminds me a lot too of, how like, especially early last year, the Trump administration, they were talking about doing exactly this kind of stuff, like confiscating your phone and then checking your Facebook to make sure you don't have any connections to radical groups. It's important to understand, like, Israel already has that kind of model, and what is quote unquote a radical group is really in the eye of the beholder. And so, like, with Israel, you have this student who, she seems pretty innocuous. And like you brought up journalists, it's like she's not even a journalist. She just happens to have particular political opinions. And not only are it's not even that they're not letting her to she's being detained. Yeah. And I'm not sure if from the article whether she's an American citizen or not, but she is an American student. It really just goes to show that, our First Amendment rights are not being protected by this government, particularly when it goes against their company line. So while you might be able to say what you want to say within the United States, this government is not going to protect you if their quote unquote allies end up locking you up.
It goes to another story that we want to talk about. Another one of our allies, murdering a journalist in the United States, not batting an eye. But just to piggyback off of what you were saying, it's not surprising. We have a right wing authoritarian government in Israel, and Israel not in and they're choosing to do these crackdowns because they don't want the world to see the atrocities that they're doing. They don't. This is the reason why every time the Human Rights Council in the UN brings up what Israel's doing to Palestinians, the Israel leaders start crying and whining and say they want to take their ball and leave. This is also another reason why every time we bring it up, like people bring it up, like Democracy Now! Or others bring up the fact that we are supporting Israel in doing these strikes and doing these just straight up supporting Israel in what Gaza is basically is an open air concentration camp. It's not even a prison.
Oh yeah,
because a prison means that you have, by law, you have to provide food and health care to the people that's in said prison. This is not a prison because they're treating the Palestinians that live in this area as if they were in a concentration camp. So no sense of human decency, no sense of dignity, and it's the Palestinians' land. It's their land. That's like me walking to my neighbor's yard saying, hey, you know all the water and heat and electricity bills that you're normally paying and how I'm staying in your house and eating all your food and I'm just using all your resources? You still have to pay all that. I'm just going to use all your resources. Oh, you want to get back into your house? No, you're not. You're going to stay on the other side of the fence now. Oh, you're going to try to cross back into your own yard? I'm going to shoot you. And the rest of the county supports me in shooting you. That's literally what we're doing. And that small example is what Israel's doing to the Palestinians, man. It's absolutely insane.
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people forget, like, that is the context of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So reactionaries and, Israel themselves, they want to paint it as, like, either an anti-Semitism issue or you are somehow...
Oh, Chuck Schumer does, too.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's like we got... or is that it's somehow against, like, Israel itself, when really, like, and think about it too, boycott, divestment, sanctions, those are all peaceful civil disobedience tactics. There's nothing in there that is particularly radical or violent as a tactic. It fully falls under the umbrella of free speech, yet here we are, our government is remaining quiet on the student who's arrested, and as you mentioned, Lawrence, like, we are continuing to give this government material support,
weapons, money. We're giving them financial support. We're giving them weapons to do so. And let me be clear, because I know some people are going to say that some people may say that we're being anti-Semitic because we're talking about the government of Israel. We're not talking about the religion. I have no problem with someone who wants to practice Judaism. I have no problem with that. I do have a problem with the government of Israel treating other human beings who are refugees, because Israel was created as a safe haven for refugees. I do have a problem with that state that was created for the safety and a peaceful habitat for people who are disenfranchised and are taken from their homes, said refugees, treating other human beings with the indecency that their ancestors had. That's my problem. My problem is that this government is using... They're using their political power to snatch land and human rights from other people, which was done to their people. So it's kind of ironic. And again, that's not me bashing Judaism. That's me bashing a government and how a government is using their policy. That's like me as a Christian being in America America being a secular nation, but has more Christians than everybody else. Me criticizing the government is not me criticizing Christianity. You know what I'm saying? And I need people to understand the difference. Some of our political leaders, Chuck Schumer, does not understand that. And it needs to get called out for the garbage that it is. But that's the thing that bothers me most about this whole issue. Because imagine if it was anyone else doing what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. Imagine if Iran or Jordan or if Russia was to do to their neighbors what Israel's doing to Palestinians.
Or, Russia's a good example because, like, not only, you broadened this out, you also mentioned, so there's a Saudi Arabian, he was born in Saudi Arabia. He was also a
transition
frequent columnist, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and he mysteriously disappeared after going to the Saudi consulate in Turkey. And there is some very reputable concrete suspicions of foul play.
There was a 15-man outfit that was at the consulate that has been reported that basically made this reporter disappear.
Yep.
And it's frightening, but it's not surprising. The reason why it's not surprising, because we're talking about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia just got done killing the women who they imprisoned the women that wanted to drive. They let the women in the country drive, and then the people who started the protest, they've executed. This is the same country that will execute you for witchcraft, and they will execute you for drug smuggling in the public, like in the public square. They will behead you in the public square.
They're a vital partner to the United States, and we must not forget that.
As Dr. Cornel West said, if Saudi Arabia was giving America cabbages instead of oil, and they wasn't if they were not exchanging their money into the petrodollar instead of having all of their money for their oil resources being converted into the American dollar. So again, if the country was giving us cabbages instead of oil, we would not be friends with this authoritative dictatorship.
And that is absolutely true. And like, just kind of, so I want to kind of sew this thread through a couple of different things. So, I brought up, like, again, imagine it was an American journalist who disappeared at a Russian embassy or an Iranian embassy or somebody we don't consider one of our quote-unquote friends. It would be a huge international outcry. Right now, you have a profound silence from everybody involved in the government. It has made some mainstream news, primarily because he was a high-profile columnist for some mainstream newspapers, but it's none of them are asking the fundamental question of like, why should we continue to be allies with a country that is literally most likely assassinating our journalists for dissidents, for speaking out of turn, speaking against the Saudi government, which, by the way, the guy in question, he was actually more of a moderate. Like, he still supported Saudi Arabia in the abstract. He just had he was like kind of a mild critic. Some people have even gone on to say, like, this is really so brazen because of that fact, and it really shows that Saudi Arabia just is not going to tolerate any kind of dissent against their regime. I believe the only one who's really come out and said anything was Chris Murphy from Connecticut. But
Chris Murphy, and I love Chris Murphy. That dude's a real progressive. He's a real deal. He's really about that life. And the other thing that just makes me upset is that we talk about we're fighting Sharia law, and we're fighting this radical extremists, and the money that we give to Saudi Arabia goes into the hands of a lot of those terrorist groups. Not to mention that we're funding Saudi Arabia while they commit the largest humanitarian crisis in the world of what they're doing to Yemen. So yeah, do they want someone to criticize them for them doing siege warfare on Yemen, or how they're bombing and killing innocent women and children? Or would they want a journalist to talk about how the leaders in Saudi Arabia is bribing our politicians because of our system of legalized bribery? Do they want them to talk about how the human rights abuses that they're doing is absolutely one of the worst cases by the UN standards? No, they don't want journalists talking about that. Like that's counterproductive to their narrative and counterproductive to their bottom line.
Yeah, and like it I mean, it's a cliche for me to say this, but follow the money. We brought up what is the precursor to Washington really targeting these countries? Is it because they realize they're bad dudes, they're committing human rights abuses and violations? And look at Gaddafi. Our government was A-okay with Muammar Gaddafi until he got off the petrodollar, and then just a few short years later, we saw he died. Again, we can bring up, you want to go back even further. Look at, Osama bin Laden used to be one of our best buddies, doing that guerrilla warfare against the evil USSR back in the 1980s.
We paid for the training that he did. We gave them weapons. He was friends with the Muladi. Come on, man. We've seen this playbook, and we've seen these stories play out in history time and time again. I think the thing that makes me that really is irritating is that it's more brazen now. It's more brazen, and it's much more transparent now than it was back in the day. We have the internet. We have access to information that normally we wouldn't, and that's the thing that makes me angry is that we don't have a bigger outcry for this injustice, because as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I mean, nah, man, it's not cool. It's not cool at all.
Yeah, I think the reason, we especially wanted to start the show off with these two stories, it's just so indicative of a lot of the hypocrisy that comes out of our government. Because when our own citizens, or our own journalists, our own students are going out there and get abused, get sanctioned, get murdered by people we consider our allies, particularly if we have a geostrategic interest in that country, in this case Israel and Saudi Arabia, you do not hear an outcry from the U.S. government. And this is a largely bipartisan phenomenon too. Obama was known, his administration was known to, sometimes more often they would say something in public, and I will say, his administration, one of the last things they did was actually come out in the UN and denounce Israel's land grabs and settlements. But in the big picture, we are a lot more tolerant of these authoritarian regimes violating the rights of our citizens and our people if they happen to be our allies, no matter how authoritarian, no matter how draconian, no matter how guilty of civil rights abuses they might actually happen to be.
I mean, yeah, America supports 73% of the world's dictatorships. That is not a joke. That is not a joke, a punchline. That is real fact. It's not like we haven't done regime change, it's not like we haven't turned a blind eye when it comes back to our interests, our national financial interests. These just two stories are just more of the same. And I think that I know that we wanted to talk about something else right before the break. So do you want to take the break first, or do you want to go?
Why don't we go ahead and take the break first, and then we can kind of switch gears. All right.
Hold on, what is it?
Oh.
There's one thing that is good news. I don't think it's good news, but it's still part of this international discussion. Nikki Haley resigned.
Oh yeah.
That's not that's a yeah.
It's like one of those things where it's like you be happy for like 5 seconds until she's replaced by somebody even worse. So.
She's just as bad as John Bolton. Like let's not kid ourselves. Nikki Haley is just as bad as John Bolton, but she resigned. Yeah. But this is the thing. This is the thing that makes it scary. I have never seen a high-ranking official resign a month before the election.
A month before the midterms. That's right.
I actually looked it up, and I was looking it up when we were talking about it. I'm like, has this ever happened? Because there were stories about we were talking about the New York op-ed before, and there was rumors that she's the one that wrote it. And I'm like, if she wrote that op-ed, then she's jumping ship. She's leaving. She's leaving now. So it's like I'm curious to figure out why, but at the same time, she was just as hawkish as everybody else. Mm-hmm. If Nikki Haley had her way, we would have been in a war with Iran. We would have been launched in North Korea. Nikki Haley's not a de-escalation type of person.
And I think it's important to bring that up too, because a lot of people, even a lot of like, kind of corporate left-wing media like CNN, MSNBC, described her as like a moderating force in the administration, and she was not.
My God.
No. Some radical right-wing imperialism coming from that. But apparently, I guess, like, the new rubric for somebody of good temperament is, like, they can endorse all of the atrocities they want as long as they're polite. And they don't say mean things to people.
Right. As long as they have decorum, you can burn the planet as long as you tuck your napkin in, and you eat with the right dinner fork. Like that's like seriously. Like Nikki, think about she criticized the UN Human Rights Council when they wanted to look in us. Launching into Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember, two wars that we're still in two offensive wars that we're still in countries that did not attack us. Like, come on, son. Like, she was talking about how the human rights, how we're not going to be on the Human Rights Council anymore until basically our demands are met. She was talking to them like she was a gangster, dog. Like it was. I was expecting her to drop some rap battle bars when she was talking to a lot of times when she was talking to some of these UN people. Like, you gonna give me the respect I deserve, or I'm gonna take it by force.
I think it's like, put on the empire. I expect her to put on like a pork pie hat and just be like, "We are in the empire business." Right,
you know what I'm saying? Like, Nikki Haley is crazy. Dog, Nikki Haley is crazy. Like, do not let the mainstream media fool you in thinking that she was such a great moderating force. No, look at the stuff that she actually advocated for. Mm-hmm. That woman is just as nuts as Bolton. Yeah, she's just as crazy.
And a big thumbs down to all the mainstream media who are running articles like that. Thank you for pushing the Overton window even further to the right.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll move on and keep chatting up on some other political issues of the day. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
WIDR would like to remind you to please drive safely. Drunk driving not only puts your life in danger, but the lives of others as well. If you find yourself stranded somewhere, consider calling Drive Safe Kalamazoo, phoning a friend, or having an Uber pick you up. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
That name still makes me laugh.
Oh, yeah, well, of course. Yeah. Is that, actually, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if I've ever told the story of like why I'm called that.
No, we've never.
Okay,
We can talk about that like on like we can talk about that on my show on Friday if you want to talk about it, or we can talk about it like on like a special web version. You know what I'm saying?
Tell that story sometime. But let's get back to the issues. So there's something you want to talk about, and lead off with, and I think what we'll talk about that, and then kind of tie it into some local issues that also tie into institutional racism and classism and all that stuff. So
so we had a victory last week when it came to the Laquan McDonald case. The police officer that shot and killed Laquan McDonald was charged with second-degree murder and battery, 16 counts of battery with a firearm for every shot that he put into Laquan McDonald. And that was one of the first times a police officer, and that was one of the few times that a police officer in this country was held accountable for the senseless murder of a black person. And that was a victory. I take that as a victory. That was also overshadowed by the fact that the officer that shot and killed Tamir Rice was rehired in Ohio. For those who don't remember the case about Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old kid that was playing in a park with a toy gun. Remember, Ohio is an open carry state, so if he had a real gun in the park, that probably wouldn't have been a problem. But he was a kid. He was a 12-year-old in the park playing with a BB gun, and the cops shot him within 2 seconds. In under 2 seconds. Besides the fact that the city charged the family for taking Tamir Rice dead body to the hospital, charging them $500 for the ambulance ride, the police officer was fired and then rehired a couple counties over.
Yeah.
He was rehired a couple counties over to do what he did, even though he's had a history of not being mentally stable to be a police officer. Even back in 2012, he was not mentally fit or adequate to be a police officer. The police officers knew this. The people who hired him knew this, and he's now a police officer till this day. My solution is actually something that I heard D.L. Hughley say, and I love D.L. Hughley, even though I don't think he's I love him as a comedian, and I really like some of his political commentary. My solution to these type of issues is when a police officer shoots and kills a black person or unarmed individual in America, unjustified, using excessive force, that the police officer's pension and the police department has to pay for the settlement that they're going to be giving to the family, and that police officer needs to be fired and never hired again. Because if we're going to keep saying that it's just a few bad apples, that these police officers are killing unarmed people, and it's just a few bad apples, then why do we keep rehiring and respoiling more bunches? For example, Walter Scott, the police officer that shot and killed him, he got off and he got rehired. The police officer that shot Philando Castillo, still working. The police officer who killed Eric Gardner, still working. I can keep going on. It does not make sense that we have police officers that have such reckless behavior when it comes to interacting with people who they are supposed to protect and serve, still doing said job. And they're doing said job and they're still harming and killing innocent civilians. Like, it doesn't make sense. If I know that I have some spoiled food and I take it out of the refrigerator, I don't put it back in the refrigerator on a different shelf. That doesn't make sense.
No. I mean, I will say, like, you know, looking at it in the big picture, we've had some discussions on the show before. Modern policing, as we know it, really does, the seed of that goes back to, like, slave patrols. It is overtly white supremacy. It's not even like, that's not even the subtext. That is the text. That is how it started. So in that, looking at that, there's kind of like, because there's an aspect of like kind of institutional white privilege here. And, not only is it tying this, the roots of policing itself, but what's a really good case to contrast? The officer that shot Justine Diamond, he was a Somali immigrant in Minnesota. Black, and he got prosecuted right away. Justice was very swift in that case, and it's not to say that
it should have been,
and it should have been.
Yeah,
that's right. But why is it that you get the correct steps are taken and the right kind of justice is doled out in a case where there's a black officer shooting a white woman, whereas you have these white officers who are shooting children, black children in the streets? And not only are they not prosecuted,
the officer that shot Michael Brown, still working till this day. Like, come on, son. Like, when we talk about Black Lives Matter on this show multiple times, and I've had to bring this up to a bunch of my friends. It's not, we don't say Black Lives Matter because we don't understand this. It's not that, Andy, you don't understand this. It's not that me, myself, as a black person and a person who's active in my community, that I don't understand this. There are people who are in power, like police officers, that have a right to end someone's life, and we're just asking you, before you make said judgment to end someone's life, you take the necessary steps to de-escalate a situation so it doesn't have to get there. Like, I understand that a police officer has a tough job. I want the police officer to get home safe to their family because they're doing a job. But your uniform is something that you can take off, and you're doing a 9 to 5, 40 to 60 hours a week. I salute you for that. At the same time, I can't take off my black skin. Like, let's keep, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm black 24/7. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's probably where I want to. I mean, there's a lot of pet peeves with, like, quote unquote Blue Lives Matter, but I mean, it's like blue lives, the Smurfs, the Navi. No, you take a uniform off, it's like you're just some regular ass person.
No. Here's the thing. I like, again, there was a case that we talked about. I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. 7 police officers were shot by a white dude with an assault rifle. That dude got taken in without a problem. Tamir Rice did not kill anybody. Tamir Rice wasn't threatening anybody. Tamir Rice didn't have a real gun. No. But he was shot within 2 seconds, and the police officer that shot him is still working to this day. How do you expect the community that police officer is going to be working in to trust him?
Mm-hmm. So I want to kind of pivot to we're talking about institutional racism, and last week, very specifically, FDR got brought up, the New Deal got brought up, and you said pointedly, it's like, well, of course, don't forget, a lot of FDR's, policies were racist AF.
No. Here's the thing. Let me be clear. There was a lot of things that FDR did that was good. Let's not be foolish. There's a reason why he's one of the only presidents that was elected 4 times and he died in office. You know what I'm saying? Let's be honest. And let's be honest, let's keep it real. At the same time, what we ain't gonna do, we are not gonna ignore the elephant in the room that a lot of the policies that he put in place, a lot of communities did not get.
Yeah, and what was uncanny about that is just a few days later, there's a lecture over at the Kalamazoo Public Library called How FDR Segregated Kalamazoo. So I was I wanted to play a little bit from this, just so people kind of understand, like, this is, not only is this specifically what we're talking about, but this is how it happened here in our own city. So I'm going to play, like, a clip or two from this, and I'm hoping, like, open up the discussion with you, Lawrence. So, hold on just a sec.
Be up here right after me. In 1937, FDR segregated Kalamazoo in the same way that FDR segregated all American cities in the mid-1930s. And he did so through 2 agencies that he created. First, the Homeowners Loan Corporation. They were the ones that created the racist redlining maps. And second, through the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. They were the ones that used the racist redlining maps to issue government-backed home loans on a massive scale to white people. So in his first 100 days of office, FDR created the Homeowners Loan Corporation. And the Homeowners Loan Corporation came to Kalamazoo in 1937 to draw this map of the city, a color-coded race map of the city, and the whole point of these maps, the whole purpose, was to decide what areas would be worthy of home ownership and what areas would not be worthy of home ownership. What neighborhoods in Kalamazoo would be worthy of new, sweet, government-backed loans, FHA-backed loans, VA-backed loans, and what neighborhoods in Kalamazoo would not be worthy of those new, sweet, government-backed loans. And the map was race conscious, and not in a good way. As I will show you, the map was obsessed with where African Americans lived in Kalamazoo. And as I'll show you, the maps were concerned with where African Americans would live in the future of Kalamazoo. Because the maps weren't just maps, they also came with notes. Every section of every color of the map came with fairly extensive notes about race, ethnicity, and class. So the redlining map has 4 colors, or 4 grades. Red, yellow, blue, green. Red is the worst grade. This is literally where the term redlining comes from. Redline areas would certainly not be worthy of home ownership or government-backed loans. Yellow was the next worst rating. generally speaking, not worthy of home ownership with certain exceptions. Then the blue and the green areas would be worthy of these new government-backed loans. So we start with the north side, and we start with the east part of the north side, east of Burdick Street, right here, north of Kalamazoo Ave, all the way east through the white area to Riverview Drive and the beginnings of the east side neighborhood. The east side neighborhood. This area was redlined because Negro homes were all throughout sections D1, hazardous Negro labor. That means African Americans lived here. They also lived in the white area in between, and they also lived on Riverview in the beginning of the east side neighborhood. African Americans made up about 10% of this area, which for at the time would be a lot. African Americans only made up 2% of the population at this time. Redlining was a death sentence for any place in America, and Kalamazoo's north side was no exception. I want to show you visually what that looks like. So we're going to take a walk up the red line north side on the bottom, and we're going to compare how many homes were there, how many people lived in this area before redlining. Then we're going to compare that 2 decades after redlining, and then we'll compare that with today. So right here would be Shakespeare's Pub. In the middle is North Edward Street. The left is Burdick Street, and this is North Picture. So just a few years before redlining, 67 people actually lived here. The yellow boxes are houses. 2 decades of redlining, that goes down to 29. And today, there's 4 homes in this area, surrounded by vacant lots and warehouses. Walking a little bit further, this is Lincoln School.
So, yeah, he goes on to really, break down just about every neighborhood in Kalamazoo. And, some of the other highlights that I really wanted to mention is, the system that he talks about. So he goes on to talk about, yellow lining as well, which is kind of where all, the poor non-black ethnics were designated at. And how it shaped not only he just got done talking about a little bit about the north side, but particularly neighborhoods like the Edison. And when we talk about institutional racism, this is the definition right there. And people, you'll run into a lot of ignorant people who don't understand the connection between our racist past and economic outcomes today. And what you gotta realize, 70 years ago, they racially segregated the city of Kalamazoo through redlining in a very deliberate institutional manner. This was, granted, there were just straight up racist people, but this was policy down at the national federal level that shaped our city to what it is today, and basically cloistered particularly the black residents of Kalamazoo in the worst tended neighborhoods. He especially goes on to talk about the history of public housing in the 50s and 60s, and how most of our black residents were put in completely inadequate housing, and it all really started in the 1930s when the FHA was building up all of these homes, but not for black people.
Let's look about it. Let's look at it today. I live on the north side. I've lived on the north side most of my life. Most businesses, when we talk about something as simple as getting a delivery, if I want to order food, right? This is a personal story. This is a personal story of mine. I was dating a girl who lived on Westnedge, and we'll order food from a restaurant that's less than a mile away from my house. But she lived on Westnedge, and it was 3 miles away. The food place would deliver to her house, which is 3 miles away on Westnedge, but they wouldn't cross North Street. And my house that I live on, the house that I live at, is north of North Street. So it is, and there's a lot of businesses that will not do something as simple as delivering food or pizza or something like that. They won't deliver to the north side, and they won't deliver to these neighborhoods. And then we wonder why we wonder why, when people started having businesses, or we started talking about the whole bootstrap economics that people like to talk about, not realizing that the resources and or equity that those people in those communities would have or should have has not been there for years.
Yeah.
They have not. It has not been there for years. It's been extracted from those communities, and because it's been extracted from those communities, and there are not resources being put back into those communities to help. Then we're not gonna get. Then you're not gonna. Then those people that you want to lift, that you want them to lift themselves up by the bootstraps, they don't got no straps. They ain't got no boots.
Oh, exactly. You're taking the boots and the straps away, and particularly. When we talk about even on like a smaller level, we're not talking about like billionaires and millionaires here, but the primary way, historically, the middle and kind of upper lower class has built generational wealth is with property.
Yeah.
These policies in the 30s all the way up through the 60s and 70s effectively locked out a segment of our population from building that generational wealth. And as he goes on to say, a lot of these redlining policies, like specific actual title deed, legally binding title deeds that specifically excluded selling certain properties to black residents. These were active all the way up through the 1970s.
Let's not forget, over 70% of black businesses are started, and they are started because people are putting up their homes and things of that nature as collateral, and they're using their mortgages to help their mortgage to help offset the cost of starting a lot of their businesses. A lot of black businesses are started this way. The problem is when you have a house that's in those red line districts, you'll have banks that will not do so. They will not help with the interest, or they're going to give you a bigger interest to pay on it than you would than someone else. And those type of models help to set back the financial equity that someone in my community and in that is a poor and disenfranchised community from making it to the middle class.
That's right.
And also, let's not also forget, because a study came out recently. I think it was like either a year ago or 2 years ago, when it talked about the wealth of the average white family in America in comparison to the wealth of the average black family in America. It was like, I think the study, I'm gonna pull it up in a minute when my phone charges. The study basically showed, and I'm paraphrasing, that the black household has between $25,000 to $10,000 in equity, and compared to the average white household in America, which is $100,000.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Like that. How do you bridge that gap between the two when half the country makes less than $30,000 a year?
And I'm gonna play one other clip from it, and it brings up a really good point, especially when you're trying to talk about how these issues still impact us today, and how we kind of still see shadows of redlining and this kind of disproportionate institutional racism in our public policy. He actually kind of calls out some of the issues with our current philanthropy, Foundation for Excellence model. So I'm going to play that real quick, and then I want to talk about it.
Before this was almost a perfect predictor of where the white spaces would be, where the black spaces would be in Kalamazoo, where the ownership places would be, high ownership, and where the high renter places would be. So part of my methodology was to get every Kalamazoo Gazette article I possibly could on housing throughout the decades. And I'll just say this quickly. This city is incredibly amazing at studying this problem and many other housing problems. Not so good at doing anything about them. That's significant. We need to stop studying this problem. This is where it gets uncomfortable. This is not an intellectual adventure to me. This is, as Ta-Nehisi Coates once said, haunting history. It's because it's repeating itself. So, two white men invested $70.3 million into the city. Foundation for Excellence is hoping to raise $500 million. The first thing they did with the money was reasonable. There was a structural budget deficit that they took care of. The second thing they did with this money was to lower the property taxes of homeowners in Kalamazoo. There's a racial disparity in home ownership. Most white people own their homes, most black people don't. It's a statistical investment in whiteness by proxy of home ownership. This room was 100 people, 75 were white, 25 were black. That's an overgeneralization. The city of Kalamazoo comes in with a truckload of money, and before they start giving it out, they say, well over half the black people have to leave the room. But don't worry, your landlords are going to get it. So, this will be super quick. There are many people in this room when we talk about solutions to this problem.
So yeah, I just wanted to it just the way he frames that, and I think we've said that on the show before, but and I apologize for kind of just framing it in a classist way, or just a classist way, when we're talking about the fact that the Foundation for Excellence, one of its first moves was to eliminate property taxes for all these homeowners. When, if you don't own a home, you're kind of SOL from the initial benefits of that foundation. But, as he so brilliantly illustrated, even today, because of what was done in the 1930s, far more white people in Kalamazoo own their homes than black folks, who again are not a majority or near a majority of the population of the city to begin with. So yeah, it's like you said, it is that same institutional racism right there that is basically empowering white, well, I guess I could say white landowners in Kalamazoo over the people who really need it most, and particularly the most targeted demographic in our city historically, for black working class black folks. Let's
keep it real, man. Like, overwhelming majority of our country does not own the land that they live on. They rent. And a majority of those people that rent are minorities, are poor and disenfranchised people. It's hard to own a home when you make less than $30,000 a year. And half the country makes that. You're not gonna be a homeowner when you're struggling to make a decision between, do I buy my medicine this week or do I buy groceries this week or gas so I can get to work? Like, and the fact that he brought up the Foundation of Excellence, I know we've talked about it a number of times on this show. And there's still stuff that I need to get educated on. But the fact that the Foundation of Excellence is not helping those that need it most, and they are singling out those that need it the most, only reinforces the statement that we were saying before, is what's the real purpose of the Foundation of Excellence?
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yep. All right, so... Oh yeah,
that's our break. It's 6 o'clock.
But yeah, you frame it like, at least in the sense of gentrification. But that it. I want to just recommend this video to anybody. Again, it goes into extensive detail. He really goes neighborhood by neighborhood, describing how redlining affected Kalamazoo, and even goes into some very interesting history about, there's an interesting part, I couldn't remember the time code for it, but they were talking about basically the West Natchez neighborhood in the 60s, their effort to make sure that the neighborhood stayed white, and there's actually some argument back and forth in city commission about it.
Not surprising.
Nope. But yeah, you can find this video. It's called How FDR Segregated Kalamazoo. It's at the Kalamazoo Public Library's YouTube page. It's about an hour long. I say take some time to listen to it. It is really interesting, alarming, and important information for anybody who lives in this town to really know about.
Yeah, man. Man, I know this is our break. It's our break right now, and I gotta get to going pretty soon. So, yeah. So let's take that break.
Okay. Well, actually, it looks like, according to my chart, I don't have to actually do another break until about 6:30.
Oh, nope. Never mind.
So,
never mind.
In that case, do you want to just slide on to another topic? And dealer's choice, since you said you gotta be, be bouncing.
Okay. So let's talk about something that's fun. Because I'm kind of sad. So let's get some uplifting. Yeah, let's get some uplifting news. Actually, I don't know if this is uplifting. I feel conflicted that Taylor Swift is more socially conscious than Kanye West. I mean, like that's like I'm so angry I'm so angry right now about that. I'm happy and angry all at the same time because there was some alt-right trolls there was some alt-right and some Proud Boys and other people on social media that was holding up Taylor Swift as like the epitome of whiteness.
There's this whole like kind of Aryan mythology around Taylor Swift. If you go into the deep annals of the internet.
Yeah. So in those corners of the internet where it's such an uproar, it's so sad because of her endorsing three Democrats in Tennessee. Because of the policy of the other people who are running, and that the policy of some of the other people that are running terrifies her, and yeah, why should she vote for a woman who doesn't support equal pay and doesn't support a woman's right to choose? Like why would she support a woman who's not for a living wage? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's funny because... Well, Arian... No. This is the thing. This is the reason why it's funny. The reason why it's funny is because Taylor would not actually... She wasn't in politics. She wouldn't speak on politics. And a lot of the rumors about it was because a lot of her fans were... She was... The theory was she was going to Dixie Chicks herself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that a lot of her fans are those right-wing nutcases. Mm-hmm. She realized that, no, a lot of my fans are millennials, and millennials are overwhelmingly progressive. So...
It's kind of a Nike thing?
Yeah, it's kind of... So it's definitely a Nike thing. Yeah. But, again, these might actually be, like, the things that she talked about on her Twitter. I don't got Twitter, but I did read the comments. Like, the stuff she talked about, I was like, oh, she's kind of woke.
Yeah, she's a little bit more woke than you'd expect.
Right. Yeah. I was like, all right.
This whole thing makes me... I wish I had a time machine, and I, like, go back to, like, when Kanye interrupted Taylor at the Video Music Awards. It's like, talk to people and be like, hey, in about 10 years or so, they're basically going to have like a proxy political fight with like Kanye on one side and Taylor on the other. And it's like, oh, by the way, there's a Shyamalan style twist. So it's not what you think.
Here's the thing. The thing that makes me so upset is that Kanye surrounds himself with Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens from Turning Point USA. For those who not know anything about Turning Point USA, they are a right-wing propaganda group funded by the Koch brothers. And Charlie Kirk, if you listen to him debate, if you listen to him talk on Fox News, that's all he is. He's a right-wing propagandist. He debated Hassan Piker from the Young Turks at Politicon. He's going to be debating him again at Politicon, which is actually pretty funny. And Candace Owens, don't look her up. Don't give her... If you look her up, listen to her conversation with Joe Rogan for like 5 minutes. And then you can DM me and tell me how you've wasted 5 minutes of your life, and I will apologize and say I'm sorry. Because that woman, oh my God, that woman is so dumb. But here's the thing. Kanye's aligned himself with these thoughtful idiots, and kids. And Taylor is sounding like a lighter version of Kaepernick. So that's like, I'm sitting here like, come on, man.
I will say this
world is topsy-turvy right now.
it got, so I heard that like it caused a huge spike in voter registrations. I don't know how.
Oh, it did.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to feel about that. I'm like, yay, because like I'm glad people were inspired to vote, but I mean, what does that say about like the state of our body politic, where it's like, oh, a pop star told me to vote.
Are you kidding me? Like every time, think about 2008. You had vote or die, and you had every celebrity and their mama talking about vote or die. In 2016, Hillary Clinton was surrounded by celebrities trying to get people to get out and vote. So here's the thing: I don't mind people being enthused or spurred to action because their favorite celebrity tells them. That says more about our obsession with celebrity. I do have a problem with when you are being misinformed and misled because you're choosing not to read. Which Ye doesn't do. He's said that he's an avid non-reader.
I mean, it's sad because like, wasn't his mother an African American studies professor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other part of this that makes me angry. Like I don't feel like talking about Ye.
Yeah.
But I am happy about Taylor. Yeah. I think that if Ye ends up getting another award, Taylor needs to run up on stage if she's there and says, "I'm gonna let you finish, but slavery wasn't a choice." And then I'll be happy for life, and I'll be just happy for life. But I actually do gotta dip out because I got things I have to do.
Okay, yeah. I guess I did want to.
What's the story that you want to talk about before I leave?
Oh man. Well, did you follow what was going on in Brazil? Man. So they not only so he almost clinched it. It's gonna go to a runoff election.
It's going to a runoff. Hey, it's going to a runoff, and you already have people in Brazil saying that he's not my president.
That's true.
So,
but, I mean, he did way better than most people expected. He got like almost 50% of the vote, and that 50% is what he would need in order to actually clinch the presidency. And
for those who don't know what we're talking about, if you want to give context.
Okay, yeah, it's Jair Bolsonaro, and he's been compared a lot to Trump, but he's really more of like this is a guy who called who criticized people like Pinochet from the right, saying they are not brutal enough. This is a guy who advocates basically turning the military and police loose on the population to deal with crime and just let them, extrajudicially kill, carte blanche. He's saying, I want to be an authoritarian dictator. Vote for me.
He basically wants to for those who not basically understand what we're talking about, he wants to be the exact same version of the guy from the Philippines. He wants to be that kind of president.
Yeah. Duterte,
and he wants to be like Duterte. And the people of Brazil is like, oh, hell to the no. Not today.
Well, so, I mean, a lot of them are not today, but I think like the really alarming part of this is just how many votes he ended up getting.
Yeah.
And I think in that respect, you could compare it to the Trump phenomenon.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people voting for somebody who is reactionary, who is hard right, who is authoritarian.
Yeah.
And the common thread that ties it all together is that people are fed up with the status quo. To the extent that you can compare it to Brexit or what happened here with Donald Trump, it's that, excuse me. So I'm just going to quote, this is from Double G, Glenn Greenwald, and he's a great journalist. He actually lives in Brazil.
Fantastic journalist, man.
What he had to say about this, he said, many are motivated by legitimate grievances toward an establishment ruling class that has failed them on all levels, that expresses indifference, if not outright contempt for their suffering and loss of hope, that they blame, often with good reason, for enacting policies that have destroyed their futures while refusing to accept any responsibility for it. And once that framework is adopted, any perceived enemy, and that perceived is in italics. Enemy of that ruling class becomes their friend, or at least someone whose vows of destruction become more appealing than vows to preserve the system they justifiably despise. And that reality is like Trump. Bolsonaro, also like Trump, he has a Chicago-trained neoliberal economic advisor. So while he's on the one hand talking about taking down the establishment in Brazil, his administration, if elected, would serve the economic interests of that establishment with great devotion at the expense of the working class voters. But that perception of his anti-establishment animus is what matters.
Populism wins, man. That's the overarching theme. Populism wins when you have people who are suffering because of the status quo from corporatists, man, in both parties. Either you're gonna get a fake populist that will still serve the establishment, like right-wing populists, or you're going to get the real thing from left-wing people like Bernie Sanders, man. And I know they have someone like that in Brazil who's a left-wing person, but also understand they have a lot of violence down there too. So
yeah. I mean, well, you know, the really sad part about this, it was the front runner was a kind of left-wing Bernie Sanders type, and I'm trying to find his name if he's referenced in this article, but he was actually put in jail on trumped-up corruption charges. It was his running mate, who they have running against him, who's much less popular and well-known. So the fact of the matter is, the corrupt establishment shot itself in the foot by basically jailing a true left populist, which gave the elbow room for this would-be dictator to rise up in the polls and have a real tangible shot at winning the presidency. If this election pans out to the run-up election that's going to be happening at the end of the month, he is going to be the next president of Brazil.
So you're telling me that the establishment sabotaged the person that was most popular and that the people actually wanted. They sabotaged that person so that the right wing would win and the establishment would just stay in power.
This is all starting to sound really familiar.
Yeah, we've seen this story. We've seen
Bernie Sanders isn't a
right.
you know?
Right. We've seen this story before. Like, it's amazing. One other thing, professors shouldn't be using the N-word in any other context, and I'm going to
please like, talk about this.
Look. If you want to understand what this is just a quick thing, because I really have to go. So this is just a quick thing. Ta-Nehisi Coates was asked by a white student who loves listening to hip hop, why can't she use the N-word when her friends are using it to rap music? And Ta-Nehisi Coates gave one of the best answers that I've ever heard in my entire life about why white people do not use the N-word, and why you should not be using the N-word in context like that, even if you're listening to hip hop music. If you're a professor, I'm not going to shout out your name. I don't even care about the story that much. You know better. You shouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. If I'm with my sister and my sister's with her best friend and her best friend calls her the B word, I don't have a right to say it. If I'm with my friends and my friends just happen to be gay and they happen to refer to each other as a slur towards gay people, I do not have a right to say it. I'm not gay. I'm straight. Mm-hmm. That does not give me a right to say it. Like, again, if you should not be using that word under any other context unless Nope, I can't even say that. You need to I can't even say that. You do not have a pass. You don't have a pass. There's nothing that about your title that gives you a pass. I think there's only one person that's been white that's ever been allowed to get away with saying the N-word, and that person only was allowed to say the N-word once, and they never said it again, and that was Eminem. But other than that, no, you don't get a pass. No, stop it. But anyway, I gotta go.
All right, Lawrence, thank you for joining us. And I want to just everybody read that article. It is alarming, and it really follows up a larger trend that when people feel like they don't have an alternative to the status quo, it is lurching right farther and farther right. And excuse me. I just wanted to leave off kind of the ominous prediction that Glenn leaves off in his article. Unfortunately, for the 210 million people who live in Brazil, last night's election was one of the most vivid and terrifying examples yet of that proposition. When he was talking about this. Instead of acknowledging and addressing the fundamental flaws within themselves, establishment factions are devoting their energies to demonizing the victims of their corruption, all in order to delegitimize those grievances and thus relieve themselves of responsibility to meaningfully address them. That reaction only serves to bolster, if not vindicate, the animating perceptions that these elite institutions are hopelessly self-interested, toxic, and destructive, and thus cannot be reformed but must rather be destroyed. That, in turn, only ensures there will be many more Brexits and Trumps in our collective future. And he says, the trend seems to be accelerating, with each country's similar movement synergistically feeding and strengthening one another. And, the really alarming thing about this is, we are still having our own populist leftist candidates stifled by the owner establishment, which could end up being to the detriment of not only our society, but the world at large. You think about the climate policies that are attached to these demagogues, which, by the way, try to get some time to talk about as well. We really are in a situation where everything hangs in the balance. And if we don't put pressure, if we don't put forth these kind of people who can appeal to the mass electorate against the establishment, there's just going to be more right-wing demagogues in our future. So, with that, I think I'm going to take a quick little break, and then we're going to move on to another topic. We're going to have a guest on the program. School board candidate Tandy Moore will be joining us. You're listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution. So, it's about that time of year where we start interviewing all of the political candidates, or at least as many as we can get here on the show. I do want to forward everybody, or at least bring to your attention. So we have an interview with Matt Longjohn we did a couple months ago. I'll try to make sure to put that back up for Election Day. Today, we're actually joined by one of the folks running for the Kalamazoo Public School Board. And, in my opinion, it's, to me at least, one of the most important local elections we've had in the last few years, because we're coming off of a couple of different really high-profile scandals with the Kalamazoo public school system, and also we're about 10 plus years out with the Kalamazoo Promise, and there's still a sense that a lot needs to be done. And, more broadly, and I'm sure Tandy will talk about, we will talk about this in greater depth, but the larger national attack on public education and, what we perhaps need to do here to defend ourselves against it. So, I want to introduce everyone. This is Tandy Moore, and she is running for the Kalamazoo Public School Board. Say hello to everyone at home.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, I am Tandy Moore, and I'm running for Kalamazoo Public School Board. There are 2 seats open, so you can vote for 2 people in this race. Just want to make that clear, because there are a lot of people that aren't clear on that or are confused. I can vote for.
Oh yeah.
There are 2 seats.
So first of all, why don't you just tell everybody at home, why did you decide to run for school board?
Oh, that is the hardest question, Andy.
There.
Can live with it easy.
Yeah. Just a little icebreaker here.
Yeah. I have been in, well, first of all, I'm a parent of 5 KPS students. Also, I've been involved in educational advocacy for a couple of years now. I think it was probably 3 years ago that I became heavily interested in what was going on in KPS, and just seeing patterns that are really alarming, and not seeing a lot of attention paid to it, by the community as a whole or by other social justice organizations outside of Sea Change in particular. I was working with Sea Change for quite a while. But aside from them, not a lot of focus on public ed in Kalamazoo.
So, so you stepped up and decided to run. I guess let's start off just like on kind of the issues themselves. So, why don't you start off by talking about like what is your like biggest issue if you want to frame it that, even if you want to frame it that way, and then there's a few other things I want to ask you about, but I guess I would just ask you like what is the big issue that is driving you to run for school board in this election?
I think the biggest issue is the inequity and bias. I'm sorry, I'm not close enough to the mic. I was going to say, I think that the biggest issue in our school is inequity. I think racism runs rampant through KPS, there's a lot of bias that well-meaning folks aren't aware of, and that is destroying our kids, and it's leading them directly to prison. We've heard of the school-to-prison pipeline. It is not a myth. The data is there. Take a look at it. ACLU has great information. I think, though, while that is the biggest issue, I think the most immediate issue is addressing the relationship that the community has with the school board. We need to increase transparency and accountability and push the school board to engage with the community so that we can find answers to these things.
I guess that actually leads into a question I was going to ask you, which is, so you're running for school board. What is what is leaving you unsatisfied with the current school board? What do you think they are not doing that, somebody like you being in the school board could change? Where do you think they've been falling short?
I think that, and it's really hard for me to, I don't want to pass judgment on individual folks here. There are well-meaning people. No one on the school board is, nefarious. There are no villains up there. However, there are some who are content to uphold the status quo. They are people who have not experienced what a large number of families in Kalamazoo have experienced. These are people who have been comfortable and safe all of their lives. So it's really hard for them to understand, where a lot of their students are coming from. And the problem is that they're not making enough effort to do that.
So, when we talk about disparity, we were actually, earlier on in the program, we were brought up, we played some clips from the FDR segregation lecture that happened at the library last week. And, we're talking even more about how that factors into the city. So, Kalamazoo, kind of the way it's, set up. So you have all of these elementary schools in different neighborhoods, and they have kind of different constituencies. What do you see, what are some of the main differences between, say, a primarily white school, say, I want to cite perhaps somewhere West Winchell.
I think Winchell would be a good example. I think that the biggest difference has got to be in parental involvement. And when I say that, let me be clear that I am not blaming any of these issues on parents. Parents aren't able to be involved. They are not invited to be involved. They are not heard when they speak out. Primarily, not white parents. So when you have a primarily white neighborhood that Winchell serves, you have parents who are taken seriously, who are respected by the people in power. So I think that is probably the main difference. Also, these children are coming from homes where parents, again, have the capacity. We have more homes where, there's one parent home all the time, or, where people aren't working 2 jobs. and worried about, how to make the rent, and just a lot of things going on.
So you mentioned the school to prison pipeline earlier, and I was wondering if you could just kind of describe to the folks at home, maybe if they're unfamiliar with the term, what it means, and also how that plays out in the Kalamazoo public school system.
The school to prison pipeline, it would start, as soon as kids enter the school system, if not just before. Essentially, children are categorized as soon as they get to school. There's a certain value placed on them, and they are invested in accordingly. Again, often this is not a conscious thing that happens, but they're sorted. So we have children who are low income and children who are black, and children of color who are being discriminated against immediately, and that affects them from the beginning. In addition, the school environment has become very impersonal, institutional, and prison-like. Children are not bonding with their schools and their teachers the way that they used to. We end up with discipline problems. We use suspensions and expulsions to take care of those discipline problems, but they don't. And these kids who are suspended again and again and again, and eventually expelled in a lot of cases. And when you don't have a high school diploma, and when you have been kicked out of school and you have experienced trauma your whole life, your options are limited for survival, and there's a good chance you will end up in the prison system.
So what kind of solutions would you propose to start really getting at the root of some of these disparities that we're talking about here at KPS?
There are a couple. There are solutions out there. I think that immediately we need to make sure that all of our staff and teachers receive the ACEs training. KPS did, Nikingaburg in particular, partnered with communities and schools to offer ACEs. That's a Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey. And I think that we need the rest of our district to join in. Every staff member needs to understand, adolescent brain development and how childhood experiences can affect that, and why kids are reacting the way that they are, and how to communicate with them.
All right, and something that kind of plays into this too, something we've kind of talked about on the show and criticized, kind of the relationship between Kalamazoo Public Schools and the Kalamazoo Promise, where you have, if Kalamazoo's famous for a handful of things, Kalamazoo Promise is one of them. That maybe like guitars and that song about how there's a gal and she's in Kalamazoo. Anyway, a lot of people have criticized the fact that while overall graduation rates have risen, they certainly have not risen as much as projected, and in particular, they've still remained really stagnant, particularly among our African American male population. I know the female population has increased a little bit, but it also kind of plays into some of these racial disparities that we're talking about. So, as far as setting up a school system that prepares low-income and non-white folks for college, for being able to take advantage of this scholarship, what do you think needs to be done? What needs to be changed?
Another big question. I think that a lot needs to change. You're right that the graduation rates, there's a huge disparity. It's shameful. The disparity between, white kids and black kids who are enrolled in, the academically talented programs, or advanced classes, AP classes in high school. I was just looking at that data from 2015 the other day, and it's insane. But I think that what we need to do is look at a new way to teach kids. Fortunately, with the Kalamazoo Promise, I think that is an opportunity. No, it's not serving all of the kids, but it positions us to, we are already in the spotlight, and we should be encouraged to try, bolder things and to be, visionaries. We could set an example. We could be a model for other districts like Chicago. This is really exciting. The money is out there. There are organizations that have grants available. We can do this. I want to look at problem-based learning. or project-based learning. They're kind of used interchangeably. Project-based learning introduces curriculum in a way that applies it immediately to real-world scenarios, real-world problems and projects. It makes the material that they're getting relevant and immediately valuable, and it's teaching skills that we need.
Okay, great. And I think I'm going to kind of pivot to another topic that, has really been at the forefront of my mind. So it was around this time last year. I think it was, February, maybe? When there was a huge scandal, the principal at Loy Norrix, at the time principal at Loy Norrix, found out that he had a long storied history of sexual harassment, and that had actually got him fired in, I believe it was Florida. And it also brought up some other issues about sexual harassment more generally in the school system. I remember going to that meeting of the Kalamazoo Public School Board, and a lot of people talked about kind of the apathy that was given towards a lot of female students when they brought up concerns about harassment from other students and even some faculty. So
it's abhorrent,
yes,
what is happening in those schools. There's a game that they play at Hillside that I hear a lot about from my kids. It's a GTA. Can I say it's grab that asterisk.
Yep.
And this is a game.
You can say ass.
I can say ass.
As long as there's not an H word next to it, but go ahead. Sorry.
An H word next to it? Like whole ass?
Like whole.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, let's get back to the...
All right. After it. Now I get it. Sorry, slow on the uptake.
Instead of teasing the FCC anymore, so we're talking about sexual harassment.
We are talking about sexual harassment, and it is not a laughing matter. I'm sorry. So the GTA game, it's popular. The boys just make attempts to grab as many girls' butts as possible. So we used to have GTA Wednesdays, and that was the focus of the game. We've had several assemblies where the boys have essentially just been told not to do it anymore. But they just changed it to a different day, and now I think they have 2 days where girls have to avoid and watch constantly in the hallways to avoid being grabbed.
But so it doesn't really link to any broader issues of like consent and.
Oh, it absolutely does. Yeah.
No, I meant like the way that they framed it when they were talking to the students about it. I was kind of curious if is that even really a part of their curriculum, or
was the conversation around consent? Yeah. I wasn't at the meeting, so I imagine that there was a conversation about whether or not that was okay with the person being grabbed. But I think that the focus was more on in school we don't do that. Exactly. I think that there was an opportunity there to have some assemblies for the boys, bring some mentors in, and really explain to them what that means, what consent means, why it's important, and why they should respect the female students in their school and each other. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And obviously there's a much larger movement building around this right now. Do you think? Is there an issue with allegations being taken seriously at KPS? Do you think maybe that whole scandal was enough of a wake-up call for them? What more would you think needs to be done?
I think that we need to really work on changing the school culture. It is everywhere. It is top to bottom. The dress code for girls is incredibly sexist. I mean, the judgment that they received. I had a friend of my daughter's at Hillside several years ago. This is before the current principal, so I will say that. Was wearing a top that had cutout slits in the shoulders. Otherwise, it was like a short sleeve top, but it showed some skin. And she was called in, and it was explained to her that it was distracting to male students and faculty, and faculty, and that is why the dress code was in place. That was sickening.
Oh man. So I actually want to bring up another issue that I know you've been doing some work on. And we kind of tie this a little bit more broadly to the national, or at least the statewide discussion. But we've talked a bit about on the show how there's a lot of the right wingers on the Michigan State Education Board want to substantially change the curriculum, basically whitewash it to a significant extent. So I'm curious, you're running for school board. How much of it do you want to make sure the curriculum is preserved, regardless of what gets passed on from the state? Right. if you have the power to do that, and what your curriculum priorities would be as somebody on the Kalamazoo Public School Board.
Right. I think that, like you said, it's a wait and see with the state. We don't know what's going to happen. There are people that are very optimistic, but I was optimistic a few years ago, and yeah. So I'm not going to discount the possibility that these standards will get through intact the way that they are now. Regardless, though, we need to hold our district accountable. These are just standards. These are the minimum. This does not preclude KPS from including, the content that was removed and more content about our civil rights histories into the curriculum. And in order to do that, we need to, again, it goes back to that relationship with the board. We need the community to speak out, and we need the board to listen. I think that what happened is the board stopped listening and the community stopped coming to those meetings.
And talking again about kind of education equity, what could we do better to bring about the kind of equity so we don't have these kind of disparities in education level in our school district? And how do you even feel about kind of the de facto segregation that happens in our schools because of the way
our alternative learning program in Phoenix High School? Okay. So, and this also, I get to talk more about project-based learning. I think that what happens, alternative learning program, first of all, is supposed to be a very short-term option to give kids additional social, emotional supports and additional academic assistance as well. And they're supposed to be there for a short period and be, reintegrated into the mainstream high school, middle school. That's not happening. Kids are staying there a really long time. They are being warehoused. And then at Phoenix High School, obviously, we have a majority black male student population, and we aren't putting into these schools what these kids deserve. For whatever reason that they are there, we have failed them in some way. And I think that these kids deserve, something, a true alternative to the mainstream school. Project-based learning is a great place to introduce that. It makes the curriculum relevant and engaging. This allows the kids the opportunity to see the outcome, of their work. It allows them to, connect with the broader community and explore, ideas, career paths that they might be interested in later on. And it teaches just basic skills, hands-on skills and problem solving and collaborating and creativity.
All right. I guess, so we're about 15 minutes out. I don't have too much else to really dive into. I think I've had you on for about, 25, 30 minutes or so?
I'm not sure.
So I want to make sure to give you as much time as you need or like. So is there anything I didn't bring up that you really wanted to kind of speak about while you're on the program today?
There's a lot to speak about. I think that we touched, like you said, on the main issues. I think another really, really important thing is that we are all aware of our rights and our ability to advocate within the school system. I encourage everybody to go and look up the ACLU Know Your Rights, look up the Kalamazoo Public Schools policy and code of conduct, and how to initiate a hearing and your rights and due process with discipline matters. I am going to have all of that on my website, which is under construction right now. I had really hoped to have it done before I came in, but I promise it will be done by tomorrow. And the website is moreforkps.com. That's MOOREFORKPS.com. Again, under construction, all of this information, I will have links to all of those resources, information about project-based learning, also about restorative justice, which we didn't touch on, and a lot more on ACEs and childhood trauma.
Well, you said we didn't touch too much on restorative justice. Could you kind of speak to that a little bit more?
Restorative justice is just a way to get to the root cause of the issue, of whatever problem, whatever harm occurred, whatever infraction a kid committed, whatever behavior isn't working for them, to find out why it's happening and solve that problem. We can't keep punishing kids. They don't learn that way. It doesn't solve anything. They get suspended again and again and again. We need to find out what's going on, understand where they're coming from, and figure out how to address their needs. It's really pretty simple. A lot of people look at it as not as too soft on discipline problems, but it's quite the opposite, because there is the big portion of that is about a personal accountability and really talking with these kids and the people who have been in conflict and being accountable for their actions and how it's harmed others. And it's very, very impactful. It sounds kind of, woo-woo. It's incredible, and it works.
So, that sounds really great, and I certainly wish that the KPS had a model similar to that. So,
sorry, I don't know how much time we have, Andy, but
we got time.
No, KPS does have restorative practices in place in their schools. It is very, very limited. So they have Griffin Place doing conflict resolution, youth conflict resolution at Kalamazoo Central and Loy Norix. They're each there for just a couple of hours a week to facilitate conferences, and there is always a stack of referrals. And there could be more if we had buy-in from the entire staff. I myself had briefly worked for Griffin Place and participated in these conferences and facilitated them, and it works. It's amazing to see. But having that small piece in there is actually detrimental to the restorative justice, the goal of implementing whole school restorative justice, because it creates confusion. Not everyone understands what is going on or why they are doing it this way. Again, a lot of people think it's soft, so they don't go along with, the agreements that are reached. So with a lack of understanding, things can just go wrong.
And, something that kind of just popped in my head. What do you think about the level of just kind of resources that Kalamazoo public schools have available? And this is speaking about not only just money, but also faculty, staff, etc. We're at a time where you have teacher strikes going on around the country. We have some people at the very top of our federal government who have made it their life's mission to defund public education. So as far as getting the resources we need for our students, what is lacking, and what do we need to do to get that to them?
Okay, this is a several-part question. Money. We don't have a lot of it. That's true. Public education is grossly underfunded. That said, there are things that we can do that are not going to cost us a lot of money, that we can do to improve the schools. And we can stop spending money on things that don't work, on, reading programs that aren't effective, on curriculum that isn't doing its job. We spend a lot of money on that stuff, and we can reallocate some of those funds elsewhere if we look at more creative ways to present the material instead of relying on this prepackaged stuff, right? So that, I think, is one area that we definitely need some improvement. We have recently upped the starting pay for teachers, which is a really, really great first step. $40,000. And it makes KPS, a little bit more competitive, or much more competitive rather, on the pay scale with nearby districts. However, even with that having happened, we are still losing teachers to other districts that pay less. The environment for teachers is not a friendly one. We are burning them out. They don't have autonomy. They don't have resources themselves for the supports that they need in the schools. Their job is really, really tough. So they burn out.
All right, and once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and discussing your campaign with us. I want to ask you, if people want to find out more about your campaign, I know you talk about the website. How can they get a hold of you? Either if they want to find out more, or if they maybe want to like volunteer or get involved with your campaign.
All right. They could email me at moore4kps@gmail.com. So it's same as the website, just mooreforkps@gmail.com. Again, check out that website tomorrow when it's finished. I am not on Facebook yet. I'm getting there, and had some I haven't been on Facebook in years, folks. So, I would be navigating that, so you can look for me there. But again, I think just email our website is probably the best bet. I will say that there are also some voter forums coming up that I think that I should list, I need to grab
those. Yes. And by the way, on these forums she's about to plug, well, are they going to be streamed online? Do you know?
I believe that you can find them at magicradio.com.
Okay.
If they are not there, or if someone would like a recording, if they missed it, get in touch with me and I'll see if we can find it. They are being recorded, but I am not sure at this point where we would find them, and also if any other media comes, which they didn't to the last one we were at. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm going to cough for a second. I apologize. Hang on, Andy. Why don't you fill the air, because I don't have the right calendar.
That's quite all right. But yeah, it'll be an exciting opportunity for you to list here. There's about 4 different school board candidates running. I know Jermaine is. Sorry.
What happened?
Hold on a second. Actually, I lost something. I had a list with a bunch of info up here, but. Wait.
I've got them right here.
All right. So.
All right.
I
have them right here.
Okay.
Let me grab the flyer.
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm sorry. Now I have to make it bigger because I'm blind. All right. I am so sorry. So the first one that we did was at Edison, and you guys missed that one. I mean, unless you came, and yay, thanks. It was really, really cool. We had a good turnout and a lot of great questions. That one was last Wednesday. The one coming up is actually tomorrow, the 11th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at the Eastside Neighborhood Association. That's at 1301 East Main Street. So again, tomorrow, 5:30 to 7 on the East Side at 1301 East Main. There's another one coming up at the Vine Neighborhood Association on Thursday, October 18th from 5:30 to 7. So that is, again, the following Thursday, the 18th, 5:30 to 7. That's at 814 South Westnedge. The next one is at Allen Chapel at 804 West North Street. That one is Thursday, October 25th from 6 to 7:30. Again, Allen Chapel, 804 West North. That one is on Thursday, the 25th from 6 o'clock to 7:30. So note that the time on that one is slightly different than the rest.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the program, Tandy. And
come to the forums, please.
Yes, come to the forums. Please do that. Yeah, it's. I know a lot of people are paying attention to the congressional and gubernatorial elections, but what happens here in Kalamazoo matters a whole lot.
And a couple of, two of the people that are sitting in front of you at those forums, 2 of those people will be sitting on your board of education, and they need to hear you. I need to hear you. I think that's really what I'm getting out of these forums the most. What I'm looking forward to is just finding out what everyone is concerned about. I hear a lot, but I don't hear it all, and I know that there are things out there that are going to surprise me. So please. Come ask questions. Tell us what's going on.
All right, and I think with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the program. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. As always, you can find our episodes on YouTube. This will probably be up sometime tomorrow afternoon. And we also have a Facebook page. Go there, like us, spread the word. We do this for our own free time, trying to make sure that we spread the word about local politics, activism, and what have you. So, want to thank you all again for tuning in. Keep on fighting for that revolution solution, and have a great night.